Yeah. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another live stream event with Atlanta Film Festival. I'm Karen Ceesay, your host every weekend here, Thursday nights at 7 o'clock. We've been, had a great time talking to all these filmmakers. I think we're in week 7 now. Been giving you information about the film festival that's now been moved to September. Lots of things. If you wanted to be a screener, if you wanted to watch some films and help out with the screening, you missed out. It was yesterday. I told you that last week. The deadline was going to be July 1st. So if you missed out, you missed out. But there's still more things that you can still submit for, still things you can do, still ways to participate in the film festival. Just make sure you go to atlantafilmfestival.com and you will get all of your information. Now we have 2 classes that are coming up, which are super awesome, right? And for these classes, we actually have 2 scholarships for Black filmmakers. It's a Black Filmmaker Scholarship. And, I'm going to education. That's why I was trying to do 10,000 things at the same time. But make sure you go to the pages on Atlanta Film Society's page regarding classes, education, workshop. We've got one that starts up on July 5th. It is the Indie Film Development Intensive. You will learn so much information of getting your packaging together, getting everything you need together to make sure that you'll be able to sell your film, be able to sell what you need to sell, get the money that you need to get, do everything you need to do to take your film to the next level. So look into that class. Also, we've got a Screenwriting 101, Diverse Voices and Stories. And right now we're realizing that there is a grave need for diverse stories. We have opened up, Atlanta Film Festival has always been open to making sure that all different types of filmmakers from all backgrounds are heard and have a place to have their film shown and seen. And training the next level of filmmakers is part of what Atlanta Film Festival does. So if you've got a story, you're trying to figure out how to get this out, is somebody really interested in this? Take the class. Everything's online now, so you don't even have to leave your house, right? So go to atlantafilmfestival.com or atlantafilmsociety.com, and you will find all of the information that you need to know, okay? Now, this weekend, which is really cool, Good Trouble, it's a documentary film about John Lewis. It comes out this weekend. We are fortunate to have the Plaza Theater, which is hosting a drive-in. Yay, drive-ins are back. It's like drive-ins are the new black, right? That's the new thing to do, is going back to drive-ins. So this weekend, you can check out the film. It's, you go to the Plaza Theater, all the information is there. But there's also a big thing going on with HBCU Heroes. Many of you may or may not know that I am a graduate of Spelman College, which is an HBCU. And this weekend, we're doing something with HBCU Heroes. So if you're watching on Instagram, this is great. Check out HBCU Heroes. Lots of information going on. We'll be having panels also, just talking about voting, young people voting, people getting engaged in the voting process. So that is awesome. That's this weekend. This is our second week on Instagram. Yay. We've been on Facebook Live. We've been on Facebook. And now we're on Instagram with the masses. Yay. Thank you. So if you're watching us on Instagram, please give us a little thumbs up. Give us a little thumbs up on YouTube and a little thumbs up on Facebook Live. Okay. So let me check my little list to make sure I didn't leave anything off. Mm-hmm. Yep. I got it all. So this brings us to why we're here tonight. We have a wonderful filmmaker with us this evening from the Dominican Republic. His name is Hector Valdez. His film is Malpaso. It will be shown this year at the film festival in September. Before we get a chance to talk to Hector, we're going to see the trailer for his film.
¿Te dormiste? Para que me haga la historia.
Había una vez un hombre que se enamoró de la luna, pero también estaba enamorado de la noche. Yo no entiendo cuál es tu afán con ir para Malpaso.
Es para verlo nada más.
¿Ve qué? Mucha moca. viaje de haitiano y un maldito bajo.
¿Y dónde está tu abuelo?
Abuelo ya no está.
Tú sabes que yo creo que me soñé con él.
¿Con quién?
Con papá, el hombre de cuento que viene a buscarnos.
Papá.
¡Despierta! ¡Ven, vámonos! Aquel que está asustado pierde. ¿Oíste? ¿Quién tú eres?
Tú eres mudo.
El que le ponga la mano a mi hermano lo mato.
Tú tienes valor, carajito.
Dicen que los sueños son la ventana del alma.
¡No cuentes la cheña!
El que tiene el alma negra de dolor deja de soñar.
Esta es la historia de cómo nacimos nosotros.
¡Cándido!
De por qué tú eres blanco como la luna y yo negro como la noche.
Okay, well, we are coming back in from seeing that trailer. Before we get into talking about your film, we want to look. I'm making sure I've got all my sound down everywhere. Just tell us a little bit about your background, and you're from the DR, hanging out there now, been there, and tell us about how you became a filmmaker, your background, support from your family, all those types of cool stuff.
All right, so I was born and raised in Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic, and I think that ever since I was a kid, I was known in school as the kid that would go to every school trip with a video camera that I took from my dad. The typical like camcorder for birthdays, family trips, and whatnot. And I started making short films maybe as young as the age of 7 or 8. I didn't know what I was doing, obviously, but I knew that I had an itch to tell stories. Then in high school, I also went to high school here in the Dominican Republic, and whenever we had a school project or a presentation or just about anything that could excuse having a camera, I would be the one to propose or suggest the use of a video camera to make a video. So I've been into filmmaker since I was 7. My first I think my first entry point for inspiration and for many of my generation, I think it was the films of Steven Spielberg and George Lucas. I am a huge Star. I actually tried to make my own version of a Star Wars film at some point in my childhood, and also my own version of a Jurassic Park film in my childhood. Those are things that I wish I still had, those tapes. So I went to university in Montreal, Canada, at McGill University. I didn't formally go to film school, but I was also very interested in films, in film appreciation, and I minored in film studies, and I began making short films as well during my time as a student. And the cool thing that happened was that during those years, there was a film tax incentive that was approved in my country, the Dominican Republic, which basically opened the doors for many up-and-coming filmmakers, and for there to actually be a film industry in the Dominican Republic. So as soon as I graduated from college, I came back in 2012 to the Dominican Republic, and started working in films. I did my first one of my first films was a documentary about Dominican, Afro-Caribbean and Caribbean identity in Dominican visual arts, which was, to me, that was one of the most. I think it was a turning point for me in terms of the type of work that I wish to create and what I approach as a filmmaker thematically. And then in 2018, I actually screened another film here at the Atlanta Film Festival, which was called Melocotones, Peaches, which was a science fiction film about a time loop where there's this like intricate love triangle set across time in one single location, but it's a retro-futuristic landscape in the Caribbean, and which is very different from the film that's actually getting shown this year. So that's also something that I always try consciously to reinvent myself with each work, but while still remaining faithful to my roots, my identity, and well, the things that make me tick as a creative.
Well, that's great. We watched, every week I talk about how we've got a viewing on Wednesday nights with my family to watch it. And it was really it was really beautifully shot. And just it being in black and white and everything, it just was it was like as if I really didn't know what time period it was, kind of, it just was the story about these two brothers and, it being on the border. So let's talk about that.
Right.
Look, I'm like, I wasn't ready to talk about the film just yet. I wanted to get into more of you, but here we are. Okay, so tell us for those who don't know, what is the premise of your film? I mean, I know we just saw the trailer and everything, but
sure.
Give us a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So Malpaso is the story of two undocumented siblings growing up in the border of Haiti and the Dominican Republic. What's particular about the border in our island is that marketplaces that are shared between the two countries. I'm sure that's something you saw in the film. And to me, that was very, as a filmmaker, ever since I went to the border for the first time as a kid, that was something that really caught my attention, because it's one of the only few places in both countries that are truly a melting pot of both cultures. And to me, that was something that immediately caught my attention, because I wanted to tell the story of what it was like to grow up in such a place. So Malpaso also can be seen, I think this is something that I was actually thinking and preparing for this interview. Malpaso can be seen as I approached it as a Caribbean Oliver Twist in a way, through the eyes of Candido, our main character. He's albino, and he's growing up in one of the most secluded places in the country, which is the border. So it's good that you mentioned you couldn't tell the time period, because that was completely on purpose, because that's a feeling that I wanted to transmit in the film, that this is a place that no matter how long time passes, how much time passes, that there are things that remain the same. And even now in times of COVID, it's a place that has remained in terms of the reach of the news, in terms of the rates of infection, everything. It's one of those places that have remained secluded from all this, and that's something that I really wanted to capture. And I think that's the essence of Malpaso. What's it like to grow up in a place lost to time, lost to the authorities, and that's basically no man's land. It's a little bit like a Western as well.
It kind of, I mean, now that you're saying what you're saying, and I'm remembering what we watched, it did kind of seem like it could have even been a Twilight Zone episode, in that these people were kind of stuck in this place that was just kind of its own little place, and everything was kind of cyclical, you know. And I definitely got that, where it's just time continues to go on, and there really is no moving up, no moving down, no moving sideways. It's just this place exists in this little bubble, and that definitely came across. You know, how did this particular story get to you? How did this come to you?
Well, so I have to go back to when I was a child, actually, because this is something that has been taking one form or another at the back of my mind for, I would say, decades. Because the first time I went to the border, I was probably around 11 or 12. I would always go on road trips with my dad across the country to see, and he always instilled in me that love for getting to know the culture. And what struck me as particular was how divorced from the reality that we see in day-to-day Santo Domingo that the border was. And I went again in my senior year of high school on a school trip, and that was like six years after that, and it still felt the same. It still felt that there was no way up, no way down. It was just, that's just what it was. And then when I made my first feature, which was called Al Sur de la Inocencia, South of Innocence, I also got a chance to go back. That was probably around 6 or 7 years ago, and it still felt the same. So I started it as a short story, which was called El Arenero, the Sandman. That is basically the story of orphans growing up in the marketplace and doing all sorts of things to survive, like pickpocketing and stealing from the stands, and just doing anything they can to survive. And well, I don't know, I'm entering minor spoiler territory with this, but it was the way they saw child trafficking. That was the metaphor for the Sandman, because it was like this figure that snatched their dreams away. And that was something that I wrote as a short story back in 2013, and I first began to adapt it as, like I said, as a Caribbean version of Oliver Twist, probably back in 2015, and then I went to UNICEF in the Dominican Republic for research, and then to Save the Children in the DR for research as well, and it became something else completely. And that evolution was what eventually became Malpaso.
Yeah, it was. So where did you find the talent? Especially the two boys were just, there was just such a, you know, it was like one kid was hard and one kid was soft, you know what I mean? And they just really kind of meshed together, and telling that story with a limited amount of words too. Where did you, are we actors, or were they kids that you found? How did that work out?
Well, they both had experience in front of the camera before. Candido, which is, I would say, the more sensitive of the two, the soft brother. He was actually featured in a very good Dominican documentary about albinism in the Dominican Republic. And I remember, even as I started writing the short story when I first saw the documentary. The documentary came out in 2013 as well. So that was I actually had him in mind when I wrote the story, not even knowing that it was gonna become a film, like 6 years later, and that I was gonna cast him. So that's his face was, and the sensitivity he brought, even without being an actor, that was something that stuck with me. So when we began, like when we started casting the film, like we knew from the get-go that if we didn't get a boy, either him or a boy like him, this film couldn't be done. So the first thing I did was to actually ask the producers of the documentary. One of them is a friend of mine. I asked him, like, what happened with him? What's he up to? So he lives in a town called Constanza, which is 2.5 hours away from Santo Domingo. It's mountainside. It's secluded, a little bit like what you see in the film, but in the mountainside, a completely different geographical location. And he came to the city, and we met at the office, and there was just something to him. Like at that point, I was not sure that, but I wanted to test him. So for his brother, we started testing kids from all over the country and all over Santo Domingo, and that's how we met Luis Brian. He plays Braulio, the brother, the strong brother, and I remember he tested like 4 or 5 times. The thing is that I really wanted to be sure that there was chemistry between the two of them, and that they could really sell us that they're related. And well, everyone else came from them. Like everyone else, every casting decision was based upon that sibling relationship working on screen. And as you know, that there's the figure of the grandfather. There's more people that are related to them in the story. I don't want to give out spoilers, but they also had to have the same essence. So we tested them together. We tested them apart. So it became quite an experiment, and to me that was a very interesting experience. Not just because it was a challenge, but because that was really the point where the story began taking shape and really feeling more tangible. Because that was the point where whatever was written on the page, we knew if it was going to work, or if there were ways for whatever was written to work better for our story. So yeah, that was it was very intricate, and that's pretty much what we did for all of the kids and most of the cast. There, I also should mention that there are also veteran Dominican actors in the film. There's Pepe Sierra. He plays the main antagonist in the film. He's a figure called La Cherna in the film. There's also the man, the stranger that comes into town. His name is Vicente Santos. He's actually in some of the most award-winning films in the Dominican Republic. And there's Ramon Candelario. He has a small role almost at the end of the film. He's actually in the first Dominican film that got into Sundance, which was called Woodpeckers by Jose Maria Cabral. And so yeah, it was an amazing cast. To me, it was a great experience to work with them.
So how long were you shooting for? Like, what was your your shooting schedule like, and what was the weather like? Right.
Well, let me start with the weather. The weather was so. Since we're talking to a mostly American audience, I'm going to say it in Fahrenheit. So the weather was mostly in the 90s, 100 all day long.
Fun.
Yeah, it was very
That's fun.
quaint. It was very nice.
Right.
So
Right.
the shooting schedule was actually a very interesting challenge because we worked around the times where the market would open or close. We devised the scenes where we needed more intimacy or where we needed a huge crowd. We basically went to the marketplace quite a few times during pre-production just to get a feel of it and just to know, okay, so this is a good day for that scene. This is a good day for that other scene. So what we did was that we got the support of the community so that we could shoot almost documentary style in terms of always having the camera around, having people agree to get filmed, but not telling them when they were filmed. So that way we achieved
natural
reactions. There was actually a really cool day when we shot where you see in the film, and I think it's also in the trailer. You see the moment where the gates open. That's the moment where they let the people from the side of Haiti to come over. That's if I remember correctly, that's at 7 a.m. That's where they set up shop on our side. So we went there. It was probably like a weekend into our shoot, and we went there with a couple of scenes rehearsed when the marketplace was empty. So only the actors and some of the crew knew that we were shooting, and we also, even the black and white helped a lot for this because we shot mostly with an Alexa. Most of the film, but we managed to be able to mix and match different formats seamlessly because of the black and white. So we used a little camera called the Osmos, which is like this big. It's like the size of a fist, basically. So RDP, he would hold it with a gimbal, which is like this little contraption that you hold like a gun, and he would cover it with a handkerchief or a towel, or a small towel. So the chase scenes that are in the film were done that day, where the market was like full of people with the bustle and noise, working, moving around with the wheelbarrows. So we shot the scene, and we were filming with camera, following them around. And the reactions that you see in the film of people getting out of the way and people like honestly like reacting to what's going on were they like if we had done it another way, it wouldn't have worked. It was we had to assume that we were going to use documentary style techniques for us to be able to pull it off, especially considering that we had for this type of film, we had a very short shooting schedule, and it was very tight. We only had 2 weeks to shoot at the marketplace, and the entire film was shot in 4 weeks, in a month, less than a month, 6 working days per week. So we were there as if we were going to war. We were there to win it.
Now, have the people that were there at the market, have they had an opportunity to see it at all, or it just came out right when everything was happening?
Fortunately not. We were getting ready to release the film right before all of this happened. So we actually held we had a small theatrical release at a couple of theaters, basically art house theaters in Santo Domingo, and we actually held a small premiere like the week before the country got in a state of emergency. Everything locked out. Everything was like crazy. So it was very weird, to be honest, because we were not used to social.
Weird, I think, is the word. Look, weird is the word for 2020. It's just weird. I don't know.
It's like an episode of The Twilight Zone. Rod Serling could have done it better, like for sure. It was like we were not used to. Obviously, we were not used to social distancing. That was like an alien concept to us. We had heard about it because of what was going on in Italy and Spain, but that was not a reality for us yet. We were a few weeks behind in the pandemic. So we still held the release. We had this small premiere with cast, crew, family, and friends, but we didn't know if we should shake hands with each other. We didn't know if we could sit next to each other. So it was awkward, to say the least. But I think that everything that's going on has actually given the film more time to marinate. It makes us think more about our strategy. One of the things that I want to do when speaking of drive, one of the things that I want to do is to take it to the town, but have it as an outdoors screening for everyone that lives there and that worked in the film, and because I keep getting I still get messages even during the pandemic, like when is this getting released again, or when are you taking it to our town? So I haven't forgotten about it, and I hope that we can do it in a non-streaming way soon. That's something that I'm holding on to. I don't want to release it in a streaming platform or YouTube. I still haven't given up on cinemas.
The big screen. Yeah, everything is in kind of flux right now. I kind of want to ask you with you talk about Haiti and Dominican Republic. It's the two countries that share the same island, share the same space, but are connected. And it was pretty much colonialism that separated them. I mean, is that where the story of the two brothers come from? Does one do they represent the duality of the island itself?
I mean, I think that could be a way. That could be one way to put it. I actually set out to do the opposite in terms of I really feel that, especially with everything that's going on lately, this past few years, we need more unity now than ever. So my point with having the two brothers grow up in specifically setting the story in that place was to show a place where the two cultures mingle and mesh so much. I mean, most people that I met during my time there, they could either speak Creole, understand it. There were no preconceptions, at least overtly, as much as there sadly can be in the cities here in the Dominican Republic. And I wanted it to be a film that was more, rather than political, more humanistic. I wanted to show that a universal story that could have taken place anywhere, but in that particular place.
Right. Yeah. It seems like, here in America, the concept of border has been politicized, that concept. And it seems like wherever you are in some type of border, there's some type of fight or some type of, desire for this is my land, this is my space. It's all of these things going into what you're saying with the human experience and what is value to you and what's over there, what's over there that we don't have here, what's here that we don't have there. But just to extrapolate this whole thing, how are, what's going on here in America right now is kind of specific to what's going on in us, but the concept of race, the concept of oppression, all these concepts are universal. But how is this playing out in Dominican Republic, seeing what's going on here in America?
Well, everything ever since what happened in America a couple of weeks ago, George Floyd and all that, there has been a resurgence in our country of the term colorism, which is very important for us to be conscious of it, because we are not a country that is there's racism rampant all over the place, but it's in a, I don't want to say subtle, but it's very in between the lines, the way that it works here. It's not.
But that's the dangerous kind. That's exactly
that's
the problem. It's in the system. It's everywhere that was colonialized. There it is. The structure was created.
And it's a byproduct of colonialism, and that's the way it's been, and it's been since the 1400s, 1492, when Columbus came. So I completely agree that they should tear down the statue or do something or about the way that it's taught in schools, because most people, including myself, before I set out to learn about it, we were taught a different story about how our country shaped up, how even till a few years ago, we used to call it the discovery of America, and it's not even it's a clash of cultures. It's not. There's a huge and rich and amazing African heritage in both of our cultures, as Haiti and the Dominican Republic, and I believe that we should embrace it. I actually, before the pandemic hit, I was finishing up a documentary about the subject that's called Diaspora, because it's about the birth of the African diaspora and how it affected us as an identity. So we went to as a crew, we went to Senegal, to Dakar, to the House of Slaves, and that was a very eye-opening experience for all of us. And it was very interesting to us in terms of how, and there we felt like it was a homecoming in a way, even if you're some of our, because we were very mixed identity. We have Afro-Caribbeans, we have European Caribbeans, we have descendants from Spaniards, from all over the place. But everyone, we felt united when we went to a place. It was very eye-opening, because we felt that it was a place for healing and for moving forward, and to looking at ways in which we can honor the past but work for a better future. And I think that's where I think with everything that's happening, I think that's what society in the world in general is going to. We want, of course we don't want violence, of course we don't want but we want justice. We want to move forward. We want the world to heal. And I think this year particularly, because it hasn't only been in the US. Every other country has had protests for their fair share of issues, and I think it all boils down to that, to wanting things to be fair for everyone, to leveling the playing field, and for us to unite as the human species, as a human family.
It's I think that my husband's from Gambia, so he's from the Gambia, which, he always goes, oh, Senegal is pregnant with the baby Gambia, which unfortunately so many Americans know the story of Kunta Kinte and they know the story of Roots, but they don't know that it originated in Gambia, Senegal, West Africa, Ghana. That's the point of origin for so many of us around the world. And it was a certain, again, colonization that kind of separated us.
Yeah.
And now we're at a moment where I think we all are feeling a connection. The internet has definitely allowed us to connect in ways that we never would have been able to. I got nieces and nephews in the UK, and my family's from Montserrat, this little teeny tiny island in the, the Caribbean. I'm a Caribbean.
I've always wanted to go there.
Are you serious?
Yeah,
it's as big as my neighborhood.
I've always wanted to see Plymouth, and actually one of my favorite movies from this year was shot there. It's called
Look at that.
If you've seen it, but by Ben Stiller.
I have not. It's oh goodness, we're already in. I didn't even realize how far we were in, but we did get a question. We kind of talked a little bit more about casting and talking about how you came to the story. So when you saw Candido, when you saw this actor before, is that how he became a part of the story and you changed the story to fit that? Or how did the albinism become a part of the story? You froze up a little for me. I don't know. There we go. All right. I don't know if you're talking. You're frozen on my screen, so I'm not sure if you are responding. You gotta love communication in the new world, right? This new era. It's what we do. We're all dealing with it. And he's calling in from a whole nother country, no less. But here we go. Oh no, here we go.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, so I forgot to mention that we're having the Sahara sandstorm. So
that adds to all the biblical plagues this year. We had murder hornets, we had, the whole world stopping. Now we got sandstorms, waiting for the locusts. Yay! Okay.
Well, I'm still waiting for the UFOs and the parallel universe.
Right. I'm on The Walking Dead, so I'm like, well, the zombies haven't showed up yet, so that's a good thing,
Well, I have my zombie apocalypse kit right here.
Okay, good. You're doing better than me.
Going back to the question. I knew, like I said before, when I started thinking about the character, I always had this picture in my mind of the boy that I saw in the documentary, which ended up being the same boy that plays Candido in the story. And of course, a lot of the character came from him when he was already cast during rehearsal. And during the shoot, we adapted and changed many things to better suit his arsenal as an actor. So we wanted to be as faithful as possible, and I think, he I hope he's seeing this live now, because he's I hope he knows that he's a very special and talented kid, and he has there's this thing about him, because he has the skill unconsciously of making everyone around him love him, and he's amazing.
He had such a calmness that came across. It definitely was through that, and it was such a contrast with the brother, you know what I mean,
Mhm.
who had to become the caretaker. And you know, okay, so we're oh my goodness, we're already at 7:46. Now, I had a question from
Mhm.
earlier from what you said when you were talking about Star Wars. So what order did you watch them in? When you first watched it, what order did you see them in?
Oh, I mean, the only order that there is.
Uh-huh.
Episodes 4, 5, and 6, 1,
Thank
2, and
you.
3,
Okay.
and then wanting to forget episode 1 ever existed.
Okay. Right. Right. Okay. Okay. Well, that's proper. You've been
Yeah,
properly
I'm a proper Star
indoctrinated
Wars
into
geek.
the world. Right. That was one of the that was like a big decision I had to make with my son. I'm like, what am I gonna do? Am I gonna do episode one? I am old enough to have seen it in the movie theater when it came out. So Star Wars will always be episode 4. Like I don't call it episode 4. It will always be Star
Yeah.
Wars to me, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, and then the other ones. But so did any of that like fantasy affect you? Do you see you getting into any type of fantasy work?
Yeah, absolutely. My previous film before this, Melocotones, is a science fiction.
Peaches for Atlanta. Look, I'm like Peaches in Atlanta. Of course we had to get it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I mean that was my first foray in a feature in sci-fi. So many of the things that are in the film are actually inspired by either Star Wars, Back to the Future, or Blade Runner, because we wanted to make a film based on a future that never happened. So the film takes place in an alternate version of 2016, where there are hovering cars, there are cell phones, but they look more like the 80s cell phones, like this big, and they have the apps are physical. They have like a portable Walkman, or they send, instead of text messages, they have like a mini fax machine, and there's like a working robot at a store, and all sorts of crazy stuff. And I think that, to me, that's actually my comfort zone as a writer, as a creative. I think that's what I've been writing for myself most of my life, and that was actually one of the reasons why I wanted to make Malpaso in the first place, because it was so far out from that comfort zone for me. I'm a huge science fiction fan, and I actually am. My next film is gonna be probably a mix of those two elements, like the more of a social conscience and Caribbean story, but set against a fantasy backdrop. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. Now we're coming to the end. I think this is probably our last question, but unless we get another question in from outside, but how do you think what's going on with COVID, how's that going to affect your filmmaking process? You think?
So basically, we're gonna move into more intimate stories for the time being when it comes to fiction, and that also has to do a lot with the film that you said that I'm working on. It's a story that I'm going back to my roots, just like in for Melocotones. It's just like 3 or 4 characters, a single location, so that way we can basically quarantine together as a cast and crew with a small crew. Uh, and there's gonna be, I think that there's gonna be, for the time being, in general, especially in the local film industry, a move towards documentary films. I think that's what's gonna happen in the upcoming months, probably year, until, because I was actually I've been working on a feature film idea for the past 3.5 years, and that I will not be able to do due to COVID.
Same here.
But the reason
Same
is
here.
because we were gonna shoot most of the film in a landfill. So yeah, like COVID, bacteria, virus, like
Yeah.
it's
Let's
not
wait for a
something. you don't want to be in a landfill. So it's
right. Let's get a vaccine first. How about that?
Yeah, exactly. So I had to like well, put it in the back burner, like shelve it until it's safe, because that's the first thing that I have to do as a director. I have to guarantee safety for my cast and my crew, and I will not have them do something that I wouldn't do.
Exactly. Well, Hector, Malpaso was a beautiful, beautiful film. I can't wait for everyone here in Atlanta to be able to see it in September. It's been a pleasure talking to you this evening. I want to thank you for taking the time with us. And we want to thank our home team too, Justice, Krupa, Kevon, holding it down in the background, making sure everything goes well. And again, we're on Instagram now. What's your Instagram handle so people can follow you on Instagram?
So my Instagram handle is Hector Man, Hector Man, like Superman.
Okay.
But with a Hector.
Gotcha. Hector Man. That's the next film. That's the next film. Hector Man instead of Superman. No, right?
Or Marvel.
Right. He's got a big H on his chest. There you go. And you all can follow me too. Karen Ceesay. It's my name. KarenCeesay. There you go. Follow me on this here Instagram. Thank you so much. We will be back here next week at 7:00 on Thursday nights, talking with our next filmmaker. And we appreciate you taking the time to watch us and being a part of this. Thank you for supporting Atlanta Films. Check out Good Trouble this weekend, John Lewis documentary, home team, Atlanta. And so important that we all get engaged, use our voices, be a part of the process. And thank you so much, everyone. Good night.